Okay, welcome everybody to our April TELedvisors webinar. I'm really excited to see you all today. My name is Anthony Tibbs. I'm the TELedvisor convener from WA, and I'm joining from Wajak Noongar country in Perth. And for those of you that don't know, TELedvisors is a special interest group of the Askellite organization. So you can search online for more information about us. But we're a community of so-called third space practitioners. So learning designers, and so on. So yeah, today we'll be talking about AI, but from a perspective that probably doesn't get enough attention for sure. So I'm really excited to be introducing you to the presenters shortly. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. Speaking of AI, no AI recorders, please. If you try and get a bot to join and take notes, we will kick it. We've had some technical issues based on that in the past. And also, please put all of your questions and reactions and so on in the chat. And there'll also be time for questions at the end as well. So yeah, go for it in there. Yeah, so it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. So we've got Nikki Meller and Juliana Peloche. They are some of the co-founders of Women in AI Australia, and I'll be handing over to them to present the webinar. So thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. So lovely to see you all today. It's a pleasure to be attending, and thank you, Anthony, and the team for inviting us. I will hand over to Juliana to introduce herself first.
Hi, I'm Juliana. Just before anything else, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land we are. I don't know where you are, but I'm in Noongar people land, and I'm very privileged to be surrounded by this amazing nature that we have on campus of ECU. So this morning I had a quick coffee with Anthony and just going around and see all these birds and nature life. We just take it for granted sometimes, and how privileged we are from having this amazing country around us. I'm Juliana Peloche, so I'm a senior learning designer. It's been only a couple of months I'm in this position. I used to be an advisor, and I've been working with AI for almost a decade now. So it's before this crazy generative AI came to our fingertips. And then I joined Nikki. She's going to be talking a little bit more about women in AI. But this journey has been a journey of discovery and very good results, such as meeting my dear partner, Nikki Meller. I'm primary teacher by trade, so that's how I started. And to be very frank, it was a student who brought me to this land of AI. One day I'll tell you a story. This is probably another TELedvisor kind of webinar. Nick, back to you.
Thanks so much, Juliana. I would like to say welcome from Darug Nation from Sydney. We are so privileged to be joining you all today. And as Juliana said, it's really important that we actually start to collectively have more conversations around women in AI, especially now the change and the escalation of artificial intelligence through meanings of social platforms, through even personal and professional contexts, and the way it's being presented and given to us exponentially. It's just going at such speed that we need to kind of take a pause and a breath and to have a think about the impacts of artificial intelligence more broadly. I do come from an academic background. I worked at a university for nearly 10 years. I was Director of Academic Program for the School of Nursing for quite a few years. I was also Deputy Director of Technology Enabled Learning for a very short stint. So I understand some of your day-to-day experiences, and I was very fortunate to come across Juliana, who is our co-founder of Women in AI Australia, last year. And the reason why we came together was that we wanted to bring a national voice for girls, young women, and women in general in the respect of artificial intelligence. So I'm just going to share my screen. So today we're going to bring a little bit of her story to you all. As I said, we are 100% female-founded not-for-profit, where we want to actually dedicate our time and our mission to advance the inclusion, leadership opportunities, and participation of girls and women in artificial intelligence all across Australia. We want to not only connect girls from city to rural to remote to regional areas and spaces and communities, but we want to empower and actually celebrate every woman and young woman and girl from all different backgrounds, so that we can actually start to champion us a little bit more. The statistics don't lie. We have very much been excluded from many different stages of artificial intelligence. So what we want to do is actually bring together four key pillars, which is one, education through awareness, most of the time through community awareness. We want to enable access and equity to artificial intelligence, especially making sure that the digital divide is not getting bigger, it's getting smaller, and having digital inclusivity. We want to be advocates for young girls and women in artificial intelligence at all different levels, whether it's local government, state government, federal government, but also to organisations, also to companies where we are actually celebrating women coming into STEM subjects, but also highly technical areas such as artificial intelligence. Then we come to the data. There is really great opportunity for us to actually start to embed more research around girls and young women and women in artificial intelligence. Instead of us being grouped together with cold populations or Indigenous Australians, we seem to, every report that we actually read, we're grouped together. So what we want to do is actually drive more data-driven programs, but also advocacy and accessibility based on data that represents girls and women in artificial intelligence more specifically. So when we look at the statistics, the one that really jumps out to me, and this slide is very busy, the one that kind of jumps out to me is that we actually have the opportunity to reskill women in artificial intelligence with an economic benefit of $6.5 billion to the Australian economy. So that data is based on women who are in more kind of administrative roles now within organisations across Australia, and the potential that actually enabling them with more skills and more experience with artificial intelligence to actually not only get pay rises, but to also then advance with their leadership opportunities as well. We do know that women are less likely to actually go into STEM or highly technical areas, and even the career pathways and the progression that is currently mapped out for girls and younger girls, it's a bit rocky. There's a report called the Leaky Pipeline, which I take offence to being called leaky, but nonetheless, where it actually says that girls as young as 12 and 13, 66% of them in a particular study said that they're not smart enough for STEM. And this is where Juliana and I and Amanda, our other co-founder, really kind of take heart to go, you know what, we need to change that. We need to change what opportunities there are, what pathways, what programs, what does good look like? If they can actually identify with women or younger women in areas that they might aspire to go into. And that actually starts with advocacy and collaboration, but also making sure that we turn up and that people can actually see that we're visibly trying to champion girls and women in AI more broadly. So that's a bit about us and why we're the key unlock to an inclusive AI future in Australia, and just gives you a little bit of a little sense of purpose as to why we formed last year, and a little bit of insight into what we'd like to do to champion artificial intelligence more broadly. Juliana, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, so let's start with the big picture of how we are in terms of the use of AI in higher education, because we all know that adoption is no longer a question of if, right? It's just universal now. So we can see, for example, that 92% of students globally used AI in 2025. So, and there is an increase of 66% since 2024. So all the indicatives that you see, all this data that you see there, I reckon they have already changed. I mean, I can't really see anyone who's not using AI now, consciously or unconsciously, right? So what we see though is that the preparedness in institutions and the policy clarity that you can see there, like only 5% feel fully aware of their institution's AI guidelines. They have not kept pace with the changes that we have in AI. And what we know is that only 39% of institutions have comprehensive AI policies now. And only 42% of students feel that their faculty is equipped to guide them. So these are very low numbers considering the velocity or the speed of change in higher education. These big changes in policies and everything else came up, and we all know because we are part of tertiary education, that when TEXA kind of shifted from an educative to a more regulatory kind of approach, right? In May 2025, and it's going to be more effective. We're going to see in 2026 all throughout. So the 203 Australian institutions actually had to submit AI action plans. Every single university was asked to say, what are you going to be doing about it? And this shows that the need to take actions in higher education, right? All of us in every single aspect, not only academics, but us as professional staff as well. The Australian AI framework in higher education today kind of centers more in equity, and it aims to avoid amplifying digital divides. That's what we have as the picture of the way AI is being used in higher education. However, can you move to the next one, please, Nikki? I would like to talk a little bit more focused on how AI is being used by women in higher education. So let's focus on the issue of gender inequality within this use. The gap is consistent across countries, so it's not something that is happening in Australia. This is all over the world. And it's consistent in the income levels, in education levels, in every single level. We see this huge gender gap happening. It does not shrink when you control for occupation, discipline, or access, which is quite interesting. There is a study from Harvard Berkeley where researchers kind of found that when you actually remove the access barrier, the women are still 13% less likely to engage with AI. So every time you hear something saying, oh, but it's a lack of access, it's not only, there are other things happening behind the scenes. So when looking at the general population data, the gender gap appears kind of modest, as you can see, like 4.2 percentage points in the second indicative. But in higher education specifically, if we take these lenses to higher education, the gap is far more pronounced. It's way bigger in self-reported skills. So that's where we start seeing the issues coming up. When women are talking about their confidence, the breadth of use, and that's when there are really real implications for careers. And this is where we want to actually focus as well. There's a very interesting study from Norway that shows that the top performing students, 75.7% of men versus 60.5% of women, report heavy use of ChatGPT. For paid subscriptions, so there is another gap in there, men pay men that pay for subscription are about 23.3%, and only 10% of women actually pay for the ChatGPT account. At lower grade levels, usage is similar, so suggesting that the gap widens precisely when AI confers the greatest advantage. But please pay attention to the last fact over there, where we talk about competence penalty. I'll be coming back to this competence penalty later in this presentation, actually in the next slide. But competence penalty in this context is when the work someone does with AI is judged negatively. And it's often, these people that use AI to complete this work is often seen as less competent. Okay, so that's what the competence penalty is. Nikki, next one, please. Oops. Now, what led us to these numbers, right? Some of the drivers are, this is a bit busy as well, but we tried to get a bunch of literature there for you to have a look that actually supports these arguments that we're bringing to you. Some of the drivers are knowledge, confidence, and ethical concerns, as you can see. And what does that mean? Women feel that they know less about AI than men and consider important to get more familiar to the use of AI before using them. And women think they are less capable of using the tools and have some barriers that impede their use. Remember the confidence penalty? Well, that's what we see in the number 2. So I would like to read the very last dot. Women who use AI face a competence penalty that is larger than men. Engineers perceived to have used AI are rated 9% less competent than men for identical outputs. It rises to 13% for women specifically. So remember that sometimes we hide that we use AI, like that's because of this competence. This competence penalty that we sometimes face. Like if you use it, you're less capable, and this increases for women. So what is driving this? Not that something else is the ethical. I would like to talk a little bit about the ethical concerns and the risk perception. That's a very interesting fact. It doesn't mean that worried men suddenly use more. Not that worried men suddenly use AI more. That's not what it means. It says that worried women use it less. In other words, societal concerns push women away from AI, while men's behavior stays roughly the same. That means women really worry about, for example, the environmental concerns or the ethical concerns about using AI, and that pushes them away from the use. While men might have the same concerns, but the use doesn't change. Women hesitancy in using AI is not irrational, okay? So it's a risk awareness, not risk aversion. And the competence penalty is real. The ethical concerns are legitimate. The challenge is that disengagement carries its own risks. Nick, next one, please. Something that Nick and I would like to show you as well is that it's something interesting is the way women use AI, which is quite different to the way men use. And I'll have a little question at the end for each one of you. So it's important for us to understand how these uses are like to start questioning the way these tools are integrated or adopted in various institutions. Usually the adoption of these tools are quite they're not really focused on one group or the other. It's kind of a standard for any kind of institution, especially tertiary education. And if we don't bring this into conversations, we might never pay attention to how this is happening. So for example, women use AI in a more intentional way. So they are not like men that like to play a little bit more. They really use AI for what they want to achieve. They are more focused, they are more targeted, so they go straight to that point instead of being trying different tools. They use AI more creatively as well. That's another interesting finding. And they are more helpful. They use AI in a more helpful way for creating thinking. So something interesting, women found AI more useful to help with creative thinking blocks compared to men. I thought this was quite enlightening. I thought it was quite interesting. And they do have different priorities when how AI is used. There is a very interesting book called Invisible Women. If you have time and interest in reading this, how the brain of women work in different to the men. I think there is another one that was very famous a couple of decades ago, like men from Mars, women, whatever. But these invisible women show exactly what we see in research now talking about AI, how the targets are different, how the way we use AI functions in a completely different way. Now, it's not that women are not women. I just want to make clear that women are not rejecting AI. It's not this. They are adopting it in their own terms. Okay, they are more cautiously, they are more ethically, and more often thoughtfully. And this is not me saying because a woman. This is what research says. The question for learning designers here, or for anyone in this Zoom, is: are AI integration strategies only rewarding the experimental approach that favors male adoption patterns? This is something that we have to start thinking and start asking ourselves. Nick, next one, please. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because we have a visual cycle there, right? Women use less AI, which leads to fewer skill development, which make them fall behind. And then again, they use AI less. So let's think how we can address this issue. In the design of these tools, we have only 30% of male workforce involved. The other 70% are male. It's easy to see that women's voice sometimes in the development of these tools are hardly heard, right? They are not there. So with women being more victims of the competence penalty, for example, they might choose not to use the tools. We fall again in the vicious cycle. So when talking about economic factors, and I would like to read the economic factors because I truly believe that this is going to be one of the drivers that will bring the changes, as Nikki was saying at the beginning. The Harvard study estimates hundreds of billions is lost in productivity in the US alone if the gender gap persists. Female-dominated careers, administration, clerical, sales, are also most vulnerable to AI disruption. So we bring a lot of issues that can happen and it doesn't affect only women, it affects the whole society. If the use of AI is not actually more equalized. Something a little bit upset comes in the next slide, Nick. It will take us another 123 years to reach the gender parity. So the AI revolution risks accelerating inequality rather than closing it. This is what we have now. However, bringing conversations like this, calls like this, will mainly open our minds to think about what are the strategies, what are things that we can do to minimize this gender gap. Nikki?
Excellent. I might just pause there for a minute. Is there any questions that anyone has for Juliana before I go into a bit of a take-home strategy with AI?
And I'm so sorry, I'm not multitask kind of person, so I didn't read the chat. So if there is anything that was supposed to be read, it was missed by me. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I've been just kind of watching and making comments. Renata made a very good point around a point of view where people who are in admin heavy roles refuse to engage with AI tools and are doing so because they fear their jobs are being replaced by AI. And if we were going to address that, and I've just spoken to that very briefly, Renata, the workplaces I've been exposed to, and that point of view has been shared many, many times over um, by people who have been in a situation or organization where there's been no roadmap, there's been no strategy, been no AI adoption plan, there's been no consultation with employees or team members. And I think this is where the fear factor comes in. I do quite a bit of work with AI literacy, but AI adoption for organizations. And it's really, really important that you get that people first approach right, because you then start to talk to them about AI, and everyone just thinks it's generative AI, which most of the time that's what we're consuming as a society. But there's now agentic AI, and that's where people are really getting quite fearful. And they're saying, well, that will just automate my job because, I just reply to emails, or I take a phone call and I document something, and this is where organizations need to make sure that one, there is an AI leader or there's a leadership team. Two, that there's a culture where there's transparency with adoption, platforms, usage, what are the guardrails, to make actually people feel comfortable with the fact that one, they know the platform, they know how to use it, they know that their jobs aren't going to get replaced in the interim. But what does it actually mean to use these tools on a day to day so that they can actually not be fearful and actually lean in to it? I haven't really come across many organizations that have got that right yet. Some are really making headway with it, but a lot of organizations say, here's a platform, go and use it. And this is where it's a combination of trying to bring everybody together on that same pathway and journey, and to have that transparency of adoption as well. Because from a culture perspective, it's actually disengaging and disabling people from a culture perspective.
I would like to comment, someone else
Yes.
asked as well on the
Yes.
chat if the imposter syndrome is part of this. And yes, huge. They just don't call it imposter syndrome. They call it confidence level or self-efficacy. And it is like women always think that we are less capable, we understand less. But I can bring myself as an example. I grew up in a family where my mom used to say, like, I used to struggle with maths. And my mom said, yeah, 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 women is just like we were not born for maths. And I wonder how many people actually listen to this. And then we have fewer girls working in STEM or engaging in STEM at schools. And we grow up and we say, this is not for us, right? I think things are changing, but we are years away from some kind of changing in mindset, to be honest. But yes, we think that we're less capable and we do have other barriers that men don't. So when I started doing my PhD, and my PhD was in AI, I remember that I had some colleagues that were sitting next to me, and they used to work until very late, and they used to get home, and dinner was ready. Dinner was on table. I had to go home and cook dinner for my kids. So it's just like these differences that we don't pay attention because we kind of normalize. This is how it goes, and it doesn't have to be this way. We do have our space in society, and society actually needs us. It's not something that affects only women; it affects the whole society.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more, Juliana. Not only the fiscal impacts and the financial implications, but also the responsible use, but also the responsible design of these platforms as well, to actually represents a female lens more proportionately than it does now, because it is very gender biased. And this is where we really want to kind of shift the conversations. We can't sweep the ocean with a broom, but we can certainly start to have conversations. And this is where coming together today and, making sure that we start to change the narrative, start to have positive collaborative conversations that just pushes things in the right direction for us, more broadly as a society as well. Um, Anthony wrote, it's much easier to roll out a new automation where you can easily measure return of investment than bother with messy process of empowering and upskilling people. Absolutely. And this is where, you come to this kind of commercial advantage versus, people advantage. And I keep telling businesses, humans first. It's all well and good to automate some areas of your business or some areas of your day to day, but you still need that human oversight. You still need to be able to not only understand your process, but also to understand when things go wrong, you need that human perspective as well. And I think I talk a lot of the times around that fear factor of automation, and especially in that agentic space. But again, it's about how do we approach this so that we feel valued as people, and that technology, yes, it is there to help us and to complement, not to actually take over our roles, in a way where we feel that we can't go into areas and careers or jobs anymore because it is completely automated. So yeah, I understand that kind of complexity, and it's really something that, from a human resource perspective, we need to start to shift again, because the next bright and shiny thing will come along. It's not the kind of the be all and end all. Um,
I
Vishali,
just
I hope I've answered that correctly. Juliana, sorry, Dal?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that it's interesting to see that these conversations seem to be sometimes, even for women, when we listen to these things and we like all nodding and say, yeah, 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 it does happen. And but it's not everyone that pays attention to this, and it's not everyone that knows. And the interesting thing is that Women in AI have a project with Macquarie University, and I'm supervising some students. And the proposal was for us to understand how the integration of AI in Macquarie, so in the university, is looking at the women's use, how it's considering the women in the integration. So a little bit like the question I asked during the presentation. And we opened for everyone to sign up, and we ended up having 3 men coming. 3 men are looking into this. It was a shock for us because we're like, no, hang on, we want women looking at this. We want women researching. So not even to this, going back to the imposter syndrome, they probably looks like, oh no, it's AI, like I can't do that. And I remember at the beginning of my PhD, before everyone knows what generative AI was, what AI was like so accessible for everyone. Every time I talked about, oh, I'm studying AI, people used to say like, oh, you're such a geek. Oh my goodness, you must be so intelligent. And I was like, no, I'm not. If I were intelligent, I wouldn't be doing a PhD. I'm resilient, so that's different. So, so that's the thing. I think that these conversations and these perspectives need to be brought up, need to start taking place in every single place, not only organizations, as Nick has the knowledge to share with the organizations, but especially at institutions such as higher education.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And just on the lines of imposter syndrome and storytelling, I've built a AI SaaS product from the ground up. It took me nearly 2 years to build, and I knew nothing about AI before then. I was very naive into even to what machine learning was, or large language models. So having to learn things very quickly, but to also have those conversations. And I think some of the commentary on the side here, I can't remember who it was. Vishali, and she gave me a thumbs up for the name correctly. Is that I was sitting in conversations and at tables with, technical people who were all men. and there was no women. There was no women engineers that I could rely on and to have conversations and to be a bit more vulnerable with, because I was asking those naive, small questions that sometimes I felt very, silly to ask, but I needed it to be, quite descriptive, and I needed to understand things in a way that I could consume it and then move on. So I then went, you know what? Is it imposter syndrome, or am I just making sure that I deserve a seat at the table, and to start having these conversations and to start being a little bit more, you know, um, assertive with their conversations? And that's where I landed. And I'm now a member of the Tech Council of Australia, because we need to see more representation within these conversations, that we can then go, oh, Juliana, she has, a varied experience, and speaking woman to woman from a technical perspective, or from a people perspective, or from an emotional perspective. We have different needs, to having different conversations. So I think the best way we can do is just to keep joining the conversation and not feel like imposters, to feel that we have a deserved seat at that table or that conversation, and to start kind of collectively, making it more of the norm than not. And I think that's the only way we can try to actually get ahead with those types of things. I'm just going to share my screen for the next 5 minutes, if that's okay with everyone. We'll just pause on some of these questions. Please continue to put them into the chat. We are very happy to answer them, as you can see. And we enjoy actually talking with the audience as well. So keep popping the questions up. So kind of some key take-home messages, or even questions. I didn't want to actually leave you with something that's structured in a framework and all these sorts of things. We wanted this to be a bit more realistic to your everyday, in that we need to start thinking about impact, workflow, and thinking around artificial intelligence, and what is it that we're actually trying to achieve using it. So I think some of the themes in some of the kind of comments that we've seen already, the return of investment, having the conversations, making sure that, the fear factor of being replaced with artificial intelligence. We need to start actually thinking about, if we were to design something, what would it look like? What is the impact? What actually got better as a result of using it? Are we just redesigning something, or are we just layering AI on top of it? And what is it that we're trying to achieve? If AI should reshape the work, then it shouldn't be sitting on systems or processes or platforms that are already broken. So it's actually taking that step back to understanding, is it just thinking differently? Or is it actually going to help bridge, different ideas or different experiences or different skill sets as well? Because we need to make sure that we're actually embedding artificial intelligence in the right place at the right time for the right purposes as well. So it's making sure that, are we just, building capability, or is it just a usage ticker box? Is it just because we need to be making sure that we're mindful of our time, that we're under the pump, we've got 1,000 things to do, so we just want to churn things out quickly, and with that, it comes our responsibility. And we don't necessarily talk about ethical AI, because we know that AI is unethical by nature, but how are we responsible using it? And what is our responsibilities as individuals using it professionally, on a day-to-day? Are we being transparent with our usage in our workplace? And I think that's a really important thing as well, because again, there is still stigma around AI usage. And when you say to people, oh, that email looks like it's been written by AI, and I've had people go, no, it's not. I'm like, you can quite clearly see the M dashes and the Z's in it. And, you haven't validated the output as, as much as you could. But it's just this fear. And it's, how do we actually start to leverage it for our advantage, either efficiency or productivity, or whatever capacity you're using it as. So it's really, really important that, how do we start thinking about the impact of it? How do we use it in our workflows or processes? How do we use it for ideation and thinking? And then what does that kind of little microsystem look like? So you might start to ask yourself questions about what's the actual problems I'm trying to solve by using it? Who's going to benefit from AI use? How will we measure improvement or impact? And especially from a student perspective as well. I know it's very grey area at the moment, and there's a lot of kind of usage of AI in different ways. But if we actually teach people responsible use, if we teach them the guardrails, if we allow them to be transparent in their usage, then how can we use it and leverage it for more positive projects or design thinking or outputs? How can we actually improve those outcomes that we can measure, that we can actually collaborate and communicate in a more positive way? Because it does come down to capability, it comes down to transparency and confidence, but also our own responsibility. And this is where we want to make sure that if we're teaching people how to use it in a responsible way, we also need the organisations to actually help support us as well, in giving us those guardrails, those policies, those standards, those guidelines, and that leadership, so that we can actually use it in a more productive and efficient way. I'm going to stop share there and hand it over to see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I would like to comment on Oreo. I think Oreo made a point asking about if we know, do you have any sense of what proportion of AI developers are women, or it's very biased towards men? And I will bring back something that happened to me during my PhD. I actually had three groups. I worked on a Delphi study. So I interviewed curriculum leaders, I interviewed teachers, K-12, and developers. And I wanted to know if their perspectives diverged or converged in terms of AI adoption in education. And I could have the gender balance in the two groups of teachers and curriculum leaders, but I could not find a single woman who was a developer and would like to participate in this research. That doesn't mean that it didn't exist back then. It's been a while that I did the data collection, but it means that it is harder. It is harder to find them. It is harder for them to find time as well, because they are with the imposter syndrome. They have to be more productive. They need to know more if they are in that space. At least that's the pressure they have. And it's harder to actually reach them, right? We can't reach them, we can't find them. So in terms of this proportion, you can't find studies that talk about this proportion. You have like 30%, as I said, like 30% of women are in the area, in the workplace, in the workspace, but specifically in AI development, we don't have this data.
Nope. That's right. And all we know is that we're kind of clumped together. So there is some statistics around total workforce ages 25 to 44 years of age. And they've just put in kind of a very grouped area called highly technical occupations. So software engineers, AI researchers, machine learning engineers, and only 20% of women only represent 20% of people in highly technical occupations in Australia. So we do have a lot of kind of statistics that we can show you where we've kind of have a 50-50 split at birth, male versus female from a gender perspective. When we go into primary schools, we see that girls' confidence actually taking on STEM subjects. Girls are 66% less confident than boys at ages 12 and 13. Then boys are 2 times more likely than girls to sustain interest in STEM during high school. So where do we come in? How do we have those conversations? I know Sharon and Anthony and Juliana and I were talking about this beforehand. And I think somebody else, is it Gitte? I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. you know, our children, how are we exposing them? How are we exposing young girls in primary school and high school to know what their pathways might look like in highly technical areas? What do these careers look like? How do we excite them? How do we make them kind of see those opportunities? Because there's going to be so many more jobs and kind of employment gaps needed. I think that by 2030 we need 10% more skilled workforce in highly technical areas. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, and we need to make sure that we're actually elevating and supporting young women and women in these areas, even women, our age in 21, not in midlife between 40 and 50. Have a pivot. I did. It's scary, but there's so many more opportunities for you to actually go in and lean into areas that you're excited about, that you want to know more about, that you have internal motivation to do. Because it's really, really important that we actually start to plug the gaps, because women are more likely to drop off. I think it's around about 8,000. I think this study was 8,000 women dropped off going into highly technical workforce. And the percentage was, I think it was nearly 70%. So there's opportunities everywhere. Just how do we get together? How do we start to progress this conversation and move forward, and to start kind of filling these gaps? I'm going to stop talking because I could talk about it for days. Is there anything else, Juliana?
Yeah, Marion asked for the reference. Let me just find it and I'll flick it to you.
Yep. And we're also going to share our pack with all references with Anthony so he can distribute to everyone on the call today as well. I think that's it from us, if there's no other questions.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Juliana. We do have a bit of time if anybody wants to hop on mic and share a question or a reaction. Oh,
I
just
just would
everyone.
like just would like to say that it was amazing to see so many people engaging in this, like coming today, and it shows us the need for this kind of conversations to happen. So it's great. Like if you're watching this recording or if you were here in this call, it's really great that you made it, that you see this as an important topic, and it gives us kind of push to carry on because we see the interest, we see the need. So that really resonates with us, and it justifies the existence of women in AI.
Well said.
Thanks, Juliana. Well, I think we're just getting a lot of praise coming in. So thank you so much again, Nikki and Juliana, for this presentation. It was really interesting. Loved all the data you brought to it. Really sparked off some very important reflections and questions from the participants. So yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.